Looking at the fourth boss in Blackfathom Deeps, we have the Void Murloc Gelihast. Now this is actually a 3-phase fight, but there are only a few mechanics for each phase. In phase 1, DPS are going to burn Gelihast down. Range and healers need to be mindful of Shadow Crash so as to not get hit. Gelihast will also put out a curse on a random player, make sure you dispel it. And lastly, Gelihast uses Shadow Strike on the tank, increasing all shadow damage taken by 10% per stack. Running 2 tanks here prevents stacks from getting too high on any one given tank, but there's some forced downtime throughout the fight, and if you run 1 tank like we did, the debuff generally falls off during that time. Once the boss reaches about 5-10% health, it's going to take 99% reduced damage and regenerate back to full health. During this time, baby Murlocs are going to spawn from the eggs around the room and walk in a straight line. Make sure not to run into these Murlocs as they'll deal damage to you, and you'll have to dodge shadow crashes as they go out. After about 20 seconds, the boss will become vulnerable to damage again, and Murlocs will stop spawning. At this point, you enter phase 2. Now, phase 2 is nearly identical to phase 1. The only differences here are that Gelihast will now fear random players, and the void zones left by Shadow Crash do not despawn. This mechanic makes dodging the baby Murlocs a second time around much more difficult. But once you finish phase 2 after the second round of dodging Murlocs, the boss will clear all of the Shadow Crash void zones in the room, signifying the beginning of phase 3. All the phase 2 mechanics persist, except now the boss spawns Blackfathom tendrils that will melee the closest player, or if nobody's in melee range, will mindflay a random raider. And lastly, there's no more Murloc phase, meaning the boss dies when it reaches 0 health. You can either kill the tentacles or burn down the boss. In our first kill here, we played things conservatively and killed the tentacles, but do note that this is a soft and rage mechanic, and eventually you will fall behind, so you will have to burn the boss at a certain point. Navigate these mechanics successfully, and you should down the boss. Collect your loot, and move on into the raid. See you in the next one.